So it is the end of winter in the British Isles, 1456. Cold is just beginning to thaw. Nights just beginning to shrink. As a recap of the last session, Battle of Douglas came to an end in favor of the anarchs, but at heavy cost to both sides. 4/5 of Ambrose's men wiped out before Nicholas, Elenid, and Robert were able to retreat to their cogs and flee the island. Meanwhile, the town was bled dry as dozens of townsfolk were turned into beastly predators bent on feeding, loosed upon the men-at-arms, and the town, and finally each other. Once a town and now a veritable graveyard of brutal horror, there is no Douglas anymore. Of course, not all was lost. Enough Nemtet revealed to the anarchs and Judith of his knowledge of Covenant corruption before he was allowed to leave. The power behind the worshipful company of Mercers, an individual by the name of Basileus, was somehow responsible for bringing Enough Nemtet into the Covenant halls. This was facilitated by the Norwick prince, Sebastian. Nicholas, Elenid, and Robert returned to London to feel the fury of Ambrose's displeasure, who blamed this defeat on Judith's multiple betrayals and Elenid's mismanagement, refusing to accept any responsibility himself. Judith was left with time to herself, beckoned by Elenid to return to the northern coast of Solway, outside of Carlisle, in July. Unswayed by Judith's other suggested targets, and unaware of what has been communicated to Mordecai, Ellen remains convinced that a surprise at Carlisle and the vitae of Broga Ironbend will be the banner the anarchs need to bring the neonates to their side, show how vulnerable these princes and viceroys are. So now we have some downtime for larger events to unfold until we reach the summer of 1456, approximately 5-6 months from now. So let us start with the group that has returned to London, begin with Nicholas. What are Nicholas's immediate and perhaps longer-term plans?
There's every indication we're going to be staying here a while, yes?
In London, it depends entirely up to you. And the others. I could go to the others too and find out what they want.
Yeah, let's find out what they're doing first.
Okay. Elenid, what are your plans, having just recently been chastised, scolded by the London Prince for your failure?
I'm going to do what was advised to be entirely normal and try to find out if there's anything up with those ships that were going to the island regularly. I'll find out if the others want in on it.
Alright, so you want to look into this ship which you heard was making regular checks at Douglas, at least at some time in the past, until there was no Douglas.
Which she did her best to memorize the flag of so she could remember.
And Robert, what are your plans? Of course, you know that your neonate coterie was dispatched probably a month ago to carry out some orders of your own. We're going to get to that in a second, but well, actually, maybe the outcome of that will probably determine what you're going to do next. So let's go ahead and resolve that. And so I looked it up, and you had 6 successes on your recruitment. So that was pretty successful in getting quality neonates. So what I'm going to do here is you're going to get 6 dice for a few different rolls for their kind of journey, their progress.
Mm-hmm.
So in summation, you have 3 neonates. The Ventrue Knight, the Bruja, and the Toreador, accompanied by your new ghoul, Heather. Their task was to join this contingent of the Canterbury Guard to strip the suffragan Bishop Goldstone of his duties at Canterbury, sent him back to Aylesbury in West Kent. Their more important task was to detain the French Bishop Louis de Poitiers, who was not supposed to be there. And all of this accomplished by a signed decree sealed by the Archbishop Bouchier himself. Your Ventrue Knight is Sir Lionel de Godin, an ambitious man ready to take credit for success and delegate failure to others, known to be well trained in the art of sword and shield fighting. Toreador courtesan Cecilia Guidry, a canny and cagey woman in her 30s who blends well into high society, much like yourself, Robert. Almost as well, but not quite as well as you do. But she lacks the upbringing you had. Surprisingly skilled with the rapier. And lastly, in your coterie was a Bruja, an old blacksmith, Gerard of Dover, an honest and forthright man with no real taste for politics, but seeking to explore and know the world beyond the smithy. So this group, looking to perhaps build their name, was recruited for this task. So I'm going to have you first roll, let's see. The first one I'm not going to have you roll. You're told by Heather that this group successfully stripped the title from Bishop Goldstone, the suffragan bishop. His kind of responsibilities as caretaker of the Canterbury Cathedral in the absence of the Archbishop himself are no longer required. And Bishop Goldstone was sent to Aylesbury in West Kent. The presence of the guard was more than enough to intimidate Prior Goldstone, and he departed without challenge. So you were successful in that regard. I will have you roll your 6 dice on a difficulty of 6 for the next task, which I will then explain how that goes. 1 success. Okay. Barely succeeded. So Heather also tells you that in their attempt to detain the bishop, the French Bishop Louis de Poitiers, outside the cathedral, he was successfully imprisoned in a palace guest room where Cornelius would be able to interrogate him. But the guard that accompanied them, the Canterbury Guard, was not entirely comfortable with perhaps how your neonate coterie handled themselves, and it made them a bit more suspicious going forward. You roll your 6 dice again at difficulty 8. Well, 3 successes. Impressive. Fortunately, despite their suspicion, these guards served a very important purpose. As things seemed to be success all around, the neonate coterie began their return to London. Heather tells you that the coterie became aware they were being spied upon when they were in Canterbury, and even followed by some individual. There was a conflict, an attack on the coterie on their trip back. While they stayed at an inn, they were attacked during the day by a hunter, some kind of knight who displayed powers that, of course, Heather's never seen. These neonates seemed incapable of fighting against. However, because the Canterbury guards were present and waiting in the wings, this knight was defeated. He was kept alive, barely, and brought as a prisoner. And they return to London. They have this knight, this hunter. And it sounds like the French bishop has probably been exposed to Cornelius by this time. So that is how your neonate coterie did. Quite well, as it turns out.
Robert is pleased to see something actually work once in a while.
What would you like to do?
I don't think I discussed what sort of reward these neonates would have gotten.
I kind of wrapped that into your initial role for recruitment. So I
Is your
assume
mic
it would
muted?
be kind of like either do a favor. You don't really have the coin to pay them very well anymore. Not since Francois de Masson left you for Eden Everly, or was still at Eden Everly.
Are you talking to me?
No.
Talking to Vukar, I don't hear him.
Oh. That's what I thought.
Oh, wow.
What?
I was muted for all of that. That's amazing. Did you hear anything I said?
No, nothing at all.
Okay. Lost my train of thought. What you were gonna pay them. I kind of rolled that into your initial recruitment role, but
Okay.
it can be a boon. I would say you probably do not have the finances to actually pay them money,
Mm-hmm.
but boons or some status or an agreement, something like that.
Well, reading them, what does it seem like they desire the most?
Boons would be the most valuable to them. For a task like this, probably a moderate boon. At least, since they were attacked by a hunter.
Oh, for succeeding without any deaths or exposure, I would say, and they deserve that.
Alright. I'll make a note of that. Alright, 3 moderate boons. Well, they're certainly pleased. The cogs of moving upward in vampiric society seem, to their eyes, to simply be moving forward. Surely, enough years of this, they'll gain some real status in the city.
Robert will wish them the best in that.
Now, what else would you like to do?
Okay, so since Elenid made public that she wishes to check out the docks, Robert will attend her, certainly, and suggest they go meet that one gentleman. I'm trying to remember. his name was. I don't have it on hand.
Let's see here. Constable of the port and Hull. Made friends with that constable, and you paid a shady character in Hull to watch the ports, find out when and where documents were being taken from the Mercer office. I do recall you making some inroads with somebody in London, though. Maybe I'm mixing those up. I don't see a note here for who in London you knew.
Other than the constable?
Yeah, because I have written down that you knew a constable in the port in Hull, which is in Yorkshire.
Oh, I thought he was in London too, or there was one in London.
I vaguely remember you meeting somebody in London as well, but I must not have taken a note on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you can find any note on what that was, I'll take you at your word.
Purely from memory of this gentleman, perhaps... I can't even recall who it was in York, so I'm confused at this point.
In York, it was the constable of the port. Kind of like man of the law, specifically over that port. It's like an authority figure.
Yeah.
You also had somebody who was kind of like a thief, a roguish man who was taking note of the coming and going of Mercer ships and documents.
Well, in that case, I'll just meet with this thief, see how things have been going, and I will help Elenid find the appropriate channels of which she needs to inquire with.
Alright, so you're going to leave London going up north to York?
Oh, okay. I didn't realize she was going to York, sorry.
No, that's where
I'm not going to York. That's where your contact is.
Yeah, that's what I wrote down.
No, I have no plans on going to York right now.
Okay.
It would have been find new channels, not the same guy if he's all the way in New York.
Okay. So maybe trying to get somebody comparable, but in London.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You have some skills that will definitely help you here. Unfortunately, with the beast eroding your humanity, it makes it a little bit more difficult for you. Look at your sheet.
He's also really damn hungry after that ordeal.
Since we're in Blue Book territory, everyone can consider themselves refilled on vitae for this time. Your willpower is where it is, but vitae is fine to replenish. Can you describe to me how Robert would go about getting maybe a constable of the port or like a port official in London to give him details on ships coming in and out, or even looking at ledgers, or how does he go about it?
Good question.
Let me come back to you and circle around.
Sure.
Okay, so Elenid, I think you're mostly up to date on Robert, and to the extent Robert shares most of what he finds with you. He sounds like he wants to help find this ship as well.
Alright.
What will you be doing in your pursuit?
Searching for any regulars down at the docks in case I can pay someone off to see if they've seen the ship around it. Usually the homeless population is the best source for information. They're usually around that area, are they not?
You can certainly find some people down on their luck on the boardwalk by the waters, looking for work or perhaps a free meal. So you want to find a regular in that area and then pay them for what they know about ships coming and going?
Yes.
Okay. I will not make you roll on the coin. You have, because of Ragna's stipend, you have more than enough coin to get the attention of these homeless. You find quickly that they don't track very well on which merchant ships are docking. Like, no one's paying attention because there's nothing in it for them. There's no motivation. Perhaps if they knew they were going to get something out of it, they'd start paying attention. But the only ones they really notice are, like, when the ships coming out with food stocks are making their way out. And they pay attention to those, but it sounds to you like the ship you're looking for is not one they would notice.
All right. She won't try to approach any officials on it until Robert's ready to go, because he is significantly more social than she is.
On that note, Robert, I will have you make a... Well, you're still deciding on how you want to go about it.
Yeah, it makes sense to either go at it from like a... If he's going to find another constable, he'll just get on his good side like the other previous one, because constables are used to such things.
All right. But you're not trying to bribe him.
Hey, if bribery comes up for this in particular, he's not going to be adverse to it.
All right. We'll start with... We're just trying to build rapport initially. We'll start with a charisma empathy. And because of your low humanity, I'm going to give you difficulty 8. No natural connections in London. Looking a little bit unhealthy.
Only a little bit. He still has a blush of health.
You do have a blush of health. I'll give you difficulty 7 then.
Alright.
It definitely helps when you're talking to mortals. Alright, you rolled really well either way. 4 successes. And any specialty in charisma or empathy here?
Smooth talker. That's about it.
I'll give you that. So that puts you at 6 successes. Very successful. Despite how much your beast is starting to show, you do have this natural health about you, which is a little bit off-putting, but not enough that people won't trust you with your preternatural charm. So you get to talking to one of these port officials, and it takes you a few nights of just kind of being friendly, checking in, and do you want to describe Robert at all in how he interacts with this man and kind of gains friendship with him?
Robert is... He's found it harder to be genuinely friendly around the kind. He is viewing them more as things to be used either for blood or other things. But he is well known in the ways of the world and these men, and he knows how to entertain as well. So you just make sure this man has a great time wherever they head out to. I can't think of any specifics at the moment, but that's the gist of it.
That's fine. Yeah, that's very effective. And so you begin to inquire about the patterns of the London docks, of which this man is intimately familiar with. And let's see here. Okay. He says, he tells you some of the patterns he notes, and for the most part they're quite mundane and boring. There's only one that really perks your interest at all when he tells you about it, since you seem so interested in knowing, and you get to talking for hours on end sometimes. There's this one ship which is somewhat frustrating to him. It made multiple trips to Douglas to deliver processed timber, other supplies to the island for construction, and it would often make its trips to London before going to Douglas, but it always arrived late by a few days. And there was one instance where the same ship had a manifest he was checking, and the ship's cargo didn't match the shipping order written for it in the ledger. There's some kind of mix-up, and he remembers this really strange conversation he had with the captain. The captain smoothed things over, assured him it wasn't really worth investigating. Although he doesn't recall a lot of that conversation now that he thinks about it.
How suspicious. Well, Robert will definitely pry into that because that sounds very interesting. And it sounds like one of the most interesting ships that this man deals with.
And by pry, do you mean get into the thoughts of this man, or just ask more?
They'll just ask him, like, why does he wish he could do with this ship, and or if what about the ledgers seem off? Maybe he can take a look at them. Things of that nature.
Mostly he hopes he never has to deal with that ship or the captain again. He'd prefer people go back to the way they were, and this job was easy and predictable, and times are changing, and now you can't even trust ship captains to have the right manifest. He complains for a while about this and the way things are changing, and he's tired, he's getting old, doesn't want to do this forever. Eventually he kind of remarks about the manifest, and with 6 successes I'll say that you get enough of a friendship that he does show you this entry where there's obviously like an area where something was scratched out and replaced on a date, and just looking it over, it pretty regularly seems like this ship arrives a few times each year, almost always makes a stop in London in March, which is just a month away from you at this time.
Quite so. Does this ship have a name that would be recognizable? Anything distinguishing?
Yeah, just give me one moment. So the ship's called the Hemlock, and let's see here. And it is regularly captained by a Captain Saraceno.
Okay.
It sounds like
Oh, well.
it's just a trading cog like any other. It's not like a very large ship or carrack or anything. Are you sharing all this with Elenid?
I'll share this with Elenid, and I'll put forth the thought of learning more about this captain and this ship as they spend time in London. Surely they frequent the taverns or something of that nature.
And do either of you share this with Nicholas, who seems like he's inquiring about what's going on with these plans now as well?
Robert doesn't have a reason to hide this from Nicholas.
Likewise.
Alright, Nicholas, so you are kept up to speed that it seems like the remaining Gauntlet members are interested in pursuing this lead, this ship, which seems to perhaps be called the Hemlock. And Captain Saraceno, somewhat suspicious character by Robert's investigation.
Nicholas is happy to help them with this in exchange for a favor on their. He has research that he needs to complete and needs them to help him find a place where he can do that. Not in the mansion where he has been. And since they're entrenched in London, they're the perfect people to help.
Well, Robert can certainly look and see if there's any open domains.
As far as cans are concerned, no. Unless you ask for a favor in turn.
So time to throw some status around? Is that what you're telling me?
You can go about it any way you want.
Alright, would Robert know the best person to contact for things of this matter?
You're asking what he know?
To secure someplace for Nicholas.
Let's see. You're less familiar with London than you are with Lincoln or York. Does Elenid contribute anything in the way of finding some domain for Nicholas? Doesn't she have a new manor here? Or is that in...
No, she has one here.
Okay, that's what I thought. Not that you necessarily offer that, but...
That'd be more of a last case scenario. He probably wants his privacy when it comes to his experiment.
Alright, so Elenid otherwise not Not taking him up on the offer?
The question here is the man... How far apart from the other houses is the manor space?
Not extremely far. London is quite dense, so having privacy is almost unheard of, except for the very wealthy. You're not jam-packed next to, like, the next manor over, but you could probably expect, like, a metal fence, maybe some hedge bush bordering, and, you know, probably 5-10 feet more beyond that before that kind of is a similar situation for the next manor. If that gives you any idea. While you think about that, Robert, to consider who might know or be able to help you find domain for Nicholas, give me an give me an intelligence. You can do politics or etiquette. Either will be difficulty 7.
Etiquette.
No successes. You're not sure, which kind of makes sense. You don't spend a whole lot of time in London. You weren't really raised here or spent much time in unlife here until you became a Gauntlet Lord. And Elenid, what were you gonna do?
She'd ask him what these experiments entail.
He's not afraid to tell her,
Okay.
but she's not going to like it. You've seen what his experiments are, so he will explain what he's doing.
Thankfully, she's not on humanity, so...
He's clearly not, because he seems way too excited about this. Well, as excited as Nicholas gets, anyway.
Mm-hmm. So,
To accommodate the...
how many floors were to that house, and / is there a basement?
In your house? In your manse?
Yes.
We will say there are 3 floors, not including a basement.
Oh.
It's quite nice.
That'd make things harder then.
Wait, she does have a basement or she doesn't?
It does.
Oh, it does?
So you could
That's
say
great.
A total of 4 if you include that.
Good. Basements dampen sound.
Right now,
Is the house spaced far enough that the neighbor's going to hear any unholy screams coming from?
Well, it depends on how loud.
Okay, we're gonna do an experiment.
What kind of experiment?
Put one of our coterie members in the basement, have them yell as loud as they can, just to see if the neighbors can hear. Just to make sure if it's suitable or not.
Okay. Alright. Are you doing this, Nicholas? You gonna help? You gonna shriek from the basement?
He will.
Okay, she'll be outside near one of the neighbors' houses, not on their property, just listening to hear if she to see if she hears anything.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm gonna say that surprisingly you don't hear anything. Something about the brick, the dirt perhaps. It's very well insulated by noise.
Alright, she'll go give him the good news then. So long as he's sneaky with his work, because she does not want to get into legal trouble for it.
As sneaky can be, he tells you.
Alright, Nicholas, you have your basement. It will require a little bit of work on your part. It looks like most of the basement is filled with racks of barrels of wine, larders that looks like they had cheese at some point, other dried meats, grains, mostly a stock of food for perhaps whoever it was that had this before Ellen had purchased it. There are cobwebs on much of it. You can tell it hasn't been touched in a while.
He'll enjoy putting it all in order, but for now, having gotten what he wants, he will of course assist them with their ship problem.
Alright, so you as well find out about Captain Saraceno and the Hemlock. Seems to make regular trips to Douglas, or at least it did, and following the pattern of the past, it would probably be making a stop in London within the next month probably. Am I muted?
No, Nicholas will inquire as what they intend to do with this ship, especially since there is no Douglas anymore. It's not like it's going to be making any stops in a dead berg.
Either way, from the sounds of things, it is rather suspicious, and it was supplying the anarch.
If other connections could be drawn. That they would have a supplier in London. Knowing them would be very instrumental.
Games of espionage are my favorite kind. And perhaps we can find a way to turn a tidy profit as well. It would help me to buy the equipment I need.
Any opportunities, I'm sure, will exploit thoroughly.
You wouldn't be
Yes.
Gauntlet Lords if you want masters of exploitation.
Yes, but the matter right now is the best way to go about it.
Don't these ships keep bills of lading? It will tell you who's supplying them.
Out of character, Robert, you know about those and you've looked at the records, or at least the ones written that you've seen, they all look quite mundane.
They've covered their tracks well. I'm afraid we may have to find a more corporeal target.
Goods that are unaccounted for, you mean?
Yes.
If you apply the right pressure, it shouldn't be difficult to suss out.
Though from the sound of the story... From the sound of the story that Robert told, it sounds like their captain is kindred as well.
If that is the case, then he's a double agent.
Indeed
Much
so.
like your beloved Judith.
It's not impossible. But we must be quiet about how we seek them, I think. We have the name of the ship. Perhaps some rival ship has run afoul of their business. We'd be all too willing to see a rival go down.
Robert, since you have applied your trade or attempted some work in commerce, I will say you know enough about it that these shipping contractors, while somewhat in competition with each other, are not quite the same as true merchants. They're more like delivery men than trying to buy low and sell high, and so that's why he makes the same trips, as it's kind of like an agreement to just help move supplies, ostensibly for building up Douglas over time, at least it was. So there are technically competitors, but it's not quite the same kind of idea.
So not bloodthirsty competitors. If Robert could figure out a way to pass him or someone else off as a merchant and put out there that Douglas is no longer a thing, How does that affect the shipping there, I guess?
Are you asking or just kind of thinking out loud?
Thinking out loud, but some pirates, those are... If Douglas is no longer a thing, then it would be a way in to see what ships were affected by it and who the suppliers of those ships were.
just to clarify, since you did look at the ledger of your many successes, you can kind of see what is planned, like what ships they're expecting to end up in London. And so not only is this pattern suggested that they show up at irregular intervals and have in March, it looks like there's an entry where they're expected to show up. Of course, that was written before Douglas fell. Whether or not news reached them, or if plans changed, it looks like at one point it was their plan still to show up in a month.
Mm-hmm. And not a guarantee, but it's perhaps something. But we can certainly see if they show up on that month, but I kind of want more, if you know what I'm saying.
Not really.
Well, I want to maybe put out okay, so maybe Robert will get closer to the sailors, why not? And if he ever has opportune moments, he'll just go to like a tavern and start drinking. If he gets an opportunity to mention the changes in shipping that the loss of Douglas is to have, maybe someone will be, well, not really just changes of shipping, but perhaps someone that would be knowledgeable of Hemlock. If anyone can mention Hemlock by name, that is someone Robert would be most interested in.
Yeah, I'll spare you the roll since you have so many dice for it, and chatting people up to build rapport and friendship is pretty easy for you, even with lowering humanity. Once you spend a couple nights at some of the local taverns and inns, kind of talking to the sailors coming off the ships, and you talk about the fall of Douglas, which it seems like much propaganda has gone into ensuring that the silence of the blood is preserved, that this was attacked by some distant seafaring group thought to be maybe Danish or maybe Eastern and Northern in origin, some great onslaught like in centuries past. That's how it's been explained away. And some of them do gripe about the loss of work and the uncertainty it brings. There's already this ongoing feud between the Yorkists and the Lancasters. Trade is already suffering a lot. And for this, the loss of Douglas has disheartened many sailors about their futures and about what's going to happen. So far as the impact on what ships go where, most of them seem confident that whatever happens, as long as they stay in London, that seems to be the heart of trade in the British Isles right now. And so whatever happens at the other ports, they're hopeful that things will change not too much for them for work to remain viable. If you mention the Hemlock,
I kind of want to avoid mentioning Hemlock, but
okay.
if
Avoid mentioning.
I don't want that name to come out and arouse suspicion. I think that would be way too suspicious.
Okay. So yeah, mostly what you get are the mundane concerns of the average man just trying to make coin for his family. Your overall impression is that the changes in which ships come from where now that Douglas is gone is kind of neither here nor there. The needs and supplies will adjust. If there was a surplus of timber that was going to Douglas, it might drop the price of timber and you'll go to a few different other ports, but nothing very enlightening or revelatory to you.
Well, Robert may bring up, like, who were the most successful captains from Douglas.
You get a few names of some of the old timers, some of the older captains have been to almost all the ports in the British Isles at some point or another. Some of them have sailed under. You never hear the name Saraceno come up.
Mostly all old timers then. So this one may be more recent. Okay. I guess the next thing to try to find out is he'll try to make a time frame for when this business started with Saraceno, perhaps by way of guessing the new upstarts when they've started.
Sure. Make an intelligence. Let's see. I want to go with enigmas, but let's see what else.
I have no enigmas.
And I'm assuming ongoing, like you're sharing your progress and your thoughts with Elenid and Nicholas.
Sure. I'll
Okay.
keep everyone informed.
Okay, so you're all you all are aware of where Robert's going with this. In case anyone wants to jump in, feel free. Make a intelligence. Can you go investigation or seneschal? Difficulty 6. I'm just trying to backdate certain events.
Nicholas definitely has enigmas, if that will help.
Yeah, you can make that roll. That would also be intelligence enigmas.
I have the investigations.
Yeah, roll it out. A couple different ways you could go about piecing together the relationship between these upstarts and
What was the difficulty again?
standard. So 3 successes from Robert, 4 from Nicholas. Wow. And all successes, all 6 successes from Elenid. So, Robert, you piece together that from this logbook, it looks like this ship, the Hemlock, was making its deliveries on pretty regular intervals, about 4 times a year, and it looks, based on what you can see of the records, that it started maybe a couple years ago. And from your understanding of when things began with these anarchs, probably 2 to 3 years ago. And Nicholas, because you did enigmas, I'm going to say you get more of an impression of what it means. And let's see, what would you know? Need to separate out what you know, what your character knows. And Helena, you were doing investigation?
That I was.
Okay. Nicholas, remind me the cities you spent the most time in. Was it Bristol? Bristol, London?
Mostly... Yeah, mostly Bristol, but a little bit of time in London.
Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna say you get the impression that this delivery ship, this kind of ferry of supplies that made its regular trips to Douglas, started making this circuit probably less than half a year after the first showing of the Anarchs, which, from what you understand, really started to pick up pace in 1455. So very recent. And Elenid, with your staggering 6 successes, you know what Robert and Nicholas know. And with your smashing success, I will say that you also are aware of something a little bit unusual for the waters of the British Isles. Right around the time that this circuit of delivery began was also around the time that you recall hearing some Elysium gossip just a couple years ago that it sounded like Barbaros had acquired a very large ship, possibly an advanced Portuguese ship of some large design that was massive beyond the size of like a cog. And it was probably within a month of around that time that, or excuse me, not a month within the time that was acquired, but about a month from the time that you heard a rumor that ship went missing, that this circuit began.
All right, Nicholas will relay the information he has in hopes they can all collaborate.
She will relay what she has, but I'm still in the process of writing it down.
He will actually ask, because it occurs to him, Robert, do you know who owns the ship? Who is responsible for its current course?
Did the ledger say what company owned the ship, or?
Let me think. From what you read, it's a private contractor, just does deliveries. It's not like sponsored by a great merchant house or anything like that. It's just an individual owner of a ship who probably hired a captain and kind of invested money into doing these deliveries. Well, at least that's what it's written down as. That's your interpretation.
The paper trail did not point out an owner. All I know is the captain.
They're doing their best to hide their tracks.
If it is indeed the same ship, then we are rather fortunate not to have run into it on the waters.
I believe we may have enough information to present to court and dig deeper on the ship. What say you all?
I will leave you to presenting it to the court. Ambrose likely does not want to see me right now.
I can manage this. Perhaps the Seneschal has some resources in tracking down.
Do keep in mind the Seneschal was the one who tried to downplay it and say that it is not unusual in the slightest, that there was likely nothing to it.
And I shall watch him closely, because these conclusions that could be drawn from the paperwork and the timeline we figured out, it matches.
If possible, give the details to the prince, not to him, if he is indeed working with them.
Of course, the prince would want to know of our progress. With nothing much more to say, Robert would gather up everything he needs to present this to the prince, and he'll probably send Heather over to Cornelius to see how things are going on that front.
All right. Do you keep Guida free with you, or send him with her?
I guess traveling alone for a woman would be very dangerous. He'll send Guy.
Okay. Your odds of survival are much better. She, of course, obliges, and they ride off direction of Canterbury. Meanwhile, you're going to go to court to speak with the chancellor and tell him about your suspicion of this trading ship, delivery ship.
Yeah, of course want to present it to the prince as well, but convincing the Chamberlain would be a very good step.
Alright, so given all the work you've all put into figuring this out, talking to people, reading ledgers, and putting this whole puzzle together, I'm going to say maybe almost a month has passed, and given that, I want to catch up Judith's timeline, because hers is time sensitive and may or may not impact your decisions as well. So we will segue to Judith.
Huzzah!
I got your message and the letter that you want to send to the Gauntlet and Mordecai. Do you want that just go to me, or do you want to put it in the main channel so they can read it, or do you want to do it yourself?
Well, the reason I sent it to you was because of who it's addressed to. He may or may not share all or some of it.
Okay.
So I figured I'd leave that level of disclosure to the storyteller, given the nature of who's...
Yeah, it is going to Mordecai first, that's true. Okay. Let me think. That's going to go to Mordecai. And you are traveling to... I'm going to butcher this name. Anglesey?
Yep.
Okay. And from Anglesey, send that letter out.
Correct. That one I figure is fairly straightforward. It's not... I'm not worried about that being intercepted. So, hire a messenger, send.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of what I want to communicate to London is a little bit more sensitive. That's going to require some...
All right. By courier, you can expect from Anglesey to London. It'll probably get there in a week. Probably, if he responds immediately, you'll probably get a response back a fortnight. So you send out the letter, 2 weeks later you get a response. If any.
If at all, yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything you want to... I mean, you'll be in Anglesey, obviously, speaking with your new contact, Ocean, who you'll be meeting soon.
For a while. I did also want to use Dominate to send a more secure message directly to Belmatea.
Okay. What's that?
Basically, here I'll explain what I want to do, and then you give me the roles. So what I'd like to do is give a, we'll say, skewed perspective of the battle at Douglas, to play the anarchs as the noble rebellion, which failed to be put down by tyrannical authority, fighting for the rights of the neonates and those who claim to be free Canaanites. I'll let you fill in the gaps as you need to, but that's the gist of it. I want the messenger to have this message ingrained, delivered only to Belmatea and no one else, and then forgotten immediately after he shares it with.
Alright, I think I will actually spare you any rolls on that, as since we're in Blue Book time, it's really just a matter of how long you need to work on someone until you have it ingrained, and there's no point rolling if that's all the barrier is time. So you will have your messenger, some nobody courier, who has this glorified propaganda story of the anarchy fighting off Covenant forces at Douglas.
Outnumbered 10-1 and succeeding in winning the...
And that is the story that this messenger will recite verbatim, specifically to Belmatea, and then he will forget immediately. I have all that?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, so no roll required. You spend enough nights, you'll get this down, and you'll know that you'll have it down since you're not a brand new canine. So for all intents and purposes, you send this courier on his way, confident that the message is ingrained in their mind. Whether they get murdered on the road is anyone else's guess, but they're bound for London. And look at this letter you're sending Mordecai. Okay. I think I know what I'm going to do. So I'm going to come back to the letter. We're going to open a scene where you meet your contact in Anglesey. All right. Just looking over some notes. All right, so you make your way westward toward the kind of island county of Anglesey. It's a low-lying island, sparse hills. It's a relatively small county, and the place you are invited to, the place you are brought to when you arrive, is a humble estate. You've seen manors like this in the past, more on the countryside. It's a wooden building, a couple stories tall, in the midst of something like a farm. When you arrive in the early evening and see that there's wooden fencing all around, it looks like they mostly herd sheep in the business of selling wool, perhaps. So it seems to be kind of a farm manor. Not extremely wealthy, but for what you've seen on your way through Wales, this is more than many people have. The land is still devastated. You pass by multiple towns on your way, which are still charred from the wars from decades ago that no one's bothered to do anything about. Overall, a very land, as you've been told and now see for yourself. And did you send word beforehand that you were going to be arriving?
She would have, as is proper.
Okay. All right. So you're approaching this large, well, not very large, a couple stories of this wooden building. Looks like many kind of manor homes you've seen in the past, relatively mundane. Painting is chipping on the edge. You get the impression that this is perhaps not objectively wealthy, but perhaps one of the wealthier parts of Wales right now. There are lights inside from what you can see. You can tell there's lit candles from within the windows. And as you approach the entrance, the sound of baaing sheep are fleeing away from the wooden fences to get further away from you.
Judith would have dressed herself appropriately for the company she's going to be keeping. Obviously, not going to dress it up too much, just because it's a country estate. There's a certain expectation for finery. Sometimes it's just wasteful.
Alright, so you're tastefully dressed, perhaps a little bit conservatively, and after knocking at the door a couple of times, it's maybe a couple minutes before it finally opens, and you see that the inside it's fairly well lit, although a little bit dim in the dark way, or the hallway of the door, and fairly tall but slender man in baggy robes and a hood, a little rope tied around his waist, opens the door. His face is somewhat concealed, although not extremely. You can still make out his face and his eyes, just not in great detail. Good evening. Are you,
Judith Stone, a pleasure.
I am Griffith, Chancellor to Lord Ocean. I shall go fetch him now. Please come inside.
And she'll do as bidden. Step inside, bowing lightly, as she does.
He watches you with some caution as you enter, and he closes the door. And he steps off down into the great hall which you've entered, and towards the back where you see more lights. The great hall is quite high, maybe 20 feet high, into this arched roof, and at the end the hearth is lit. There's a long wooden table in front of it, although no one's really seating. The decoration is fairly sparse in this manner. Griffith disappears into one of the doorways at the end, and maybe a minute later he returns in the doorway and stops as another man, a bit shorter and perhaps younger, enters. He's a fit, robust-looking young man, short blonde hair, wearing a dark blue tunic. He smiles, although it's a cautious smile, and he nods to you. Judith Stone.
Lord Ocean, a pleasure. She'll curtsy a bit.
The pleasure is all mine. Please, come, join me. And he kind of beckons you with a hand as he takes a step up the dais to the seat directly behind the hearth, the commanding seat of the Great Hall.
Are there places to sit before him, or no?
There's a seat to his right and left, and there are seats kind of below the dais on this long wooden dining room, or dining table in front of him. He kind of left, it seems like he intentionally left it vague.
She'll step up to the dais, but she won't seat herself just yet unless specifically invited. In truth, I wasn't sure what kind of welcome I'd receive. I know discussing such things has fallen out of favor.
I think you will find more allies here than elsewhere. Please have a seat. You must be tired from your ride. He gestures to the seat at his right hand.
You're most kind. And she'll slide into a seat, the one directed.
Tell me more about your thoughts on this. It's been some time since I read your letter. Prefer to hear it directly from the horse's mouth, as it says.
As I told you, I believe a great injustice was done to your predecessors. I speak for a group who might have a way of setting that right.
You are correct that a great injustice was done to my father, Meredith, and his father. He kind of looks down briefly. But what would you do about it, and why do you care?
The English crown is weak at present. New blood must fill it.
It is certainly weak. That we can agree on. But I do not know if it is within my ability to say who should replace it.
Nor would I ask you to make such a statement. However, there are those who hold compelling claims, who might press those claims.
I am sure there are many who have claims on the throne, but what good would that do for Wales?
There are those amongst the Welsh nobility who might use those claims for themselves as a way to bolster Welsh status and secure it as part of England herself. Equal. Free.
Acquired but free? Looks at you skeptically.
Was not York once a disparate part of England?
It was not so long ago that there was no England. That many of these kingdoms had their own independence. York, Cumbria, East Anglia, places that no longer exist now. All under this one crown.
I can't disagree with you. But what better way to change than from within?
Make a perception alertness roll. Difficulty 7. No successes. Alright. How do you know I do not already have plans in mind to change it from within?
In fact, I do not. That is part of why I wish to come and speak with you. so that we could have a meeting of the minds, come to an agreement, and find a mutually beneficial way forward.
He smiles warmly and looks over back to the hallway where he came out of, and you realize that, almost like a statue, this Chancellor Griffith has kind of been hovering. Griffith, see about the cooks. It is late, but surely they can find something for our traveler here. And myself. He bows his head silently and disappears. I'm glad you came. I would prefer to speak of this now rather than the morning. If you know of my lineage, of my grandfather, then you know we are not a people of waiting, of tolerating injustice for very long. And yet what I hope to accomplish does require some patience and perhaps some discretion.
If your timetable is quite short, I know of some rather eager individuals in the north preparing something quite drastic.
Do tell.
They have earned the support of certain Scots and will be making an advance on Carlisle. I admonished them not to expect support from the Welsh quite so soon, but if you are quite eager.
He kind of looks down with a measured look, as though sizing up an imaginary scale. I must be very calculated in how I spend what resources we have left. After the war, only a few scant thousand remain that might join conflict. And if I send them away, then Wales is truly without any protection.
Have you had similar discussions with your peerage?
You could say that. He says, looking to you and smiling again, almost grinning. And it's around this time that the Chancellor Griffith returns with a couple of plates, a little bit of steam coming off of it. It looks like maybe some steamed hunk of meat just off the roast. He puts it down in front of you and in front of Ocean. There are a couple candles on the table in front of you. Ocean immediately begins eating, and he kind of gestures with a mouthful for you to join him.
Let me check a thing. Your lordship is most gracious, but I find eating this late in the evening terribly harsh for my constitution. I won't sleep at all.
The Chancellor, who is kind of waiting just below the dais, looks to you from under his hood. It would be very disrespectful to our cooks. Perhaps you reconsider.
Can I do manipulation performance to mime eating without actually putting anything to mouth and
Ooh, while sitting right next to Ocean, you can try. Be very difficult.
I didn't say it was going to be easy.
Yeah, manipulation, performance difficulty 9. This Chancellor is scrutinizing you.
And probably no help from the specialty.
Omission?
Persuasive.
No.
Go ahead and spend a willpower just to be sure.
You're gonna get 5 successes or something. 2 successes with your willpower.
Hey, there's a reason why I did it.
Alright, you very handedly make use of the shadows with one fork and take one of these bits of what looks like almost charred meat, and as you bring it up, you make a sound maybe with your foot just to draw some attention away just briefly while the little slice of meat slides down your the cuff of your sleeve. Well, just in a moment, it's gone. You successfully pantomime some chewing. It's truly a theatrical miracle. The Chancellor continues scrutinizing you for some time, maybe a few more moments, before he turns and begins walking back to the hallway. I was more distracted actually with eating, kind of turns to you. You'll have to forgive my Chancellor. Very distrustful man. He's been my family for years.
Quite the contrary. I would consider him a valuable asset to your house. So protective over his lord.
Yep. He says I'm too bold. But I think perhaps in his old age, he's getting too cautious.
Is the danger of age. We see so many trials and tribulations as our lives go on. We worry about the same repeating itself.
To your question, I think I am afraid I cannot commit forces at this time. There is something we are waiting on, for which we will have to commit our forces already. Something I expect will have great impact.
Oh. Perhaps I could provide details to my allies, have them join your forces.
He smiles as he kind of sets his fork down. Perhaps I am a bit too loose with my words. Tell me again what your vested interest is in seeing the leadership of England change.
What right-minded Englishman wouldn't wish to see an infirm, psychotic replaced, and a power-mad Lord Protector usurped?
Make an appearance etiquette roll. Standard difficulty. Two successes.
See.
Yes. That infirm Henry is ruled by his wife, if one can see that. I can tell you that I am not entirely sure what I'm waiting on. A message. I know that. I have made deals with the Irish. There is quite a large organization working to worsen the conflict in England.
This wouldn't happen to be a merchant guild, would it?
Merchant Guild? No. No, the messenger, the contact we have been in communique with his representative, we are told of Irish clanlords. Honestly, did not think that they had the infrastructure for such an endeavor, but it goes to show that I, just as the English, underestimate those outside my kingdom.
It's true that the Irish balk at the yoke placed upon them by the English.
My lord, perhaps we should not speak so loosely with our ideas. You hear from the Chancellor, who you didn't even hear come in the second time. Nonsense, Griffith. This woman is clearly of the same mind as us. I trust her with such details.
Trust begets trust, my lord. I share with you details that might be detrimental if shared with the wrong people.
The Chancellor looks back to you from under his hood. Of course, I mean no disrespect, my lady. I simply worry that our allies may be severely weakened if these words get out to the wrong source. That is all.
Can I use Dominate 1 on him?
On the Chancellor?
Yeah.
What do you want to do?
Basically going to place the emphasis on a particular word and try and meet his gaze and tell him, it's quite alright. You can trust me.
Alright, so telling him to trust you. Let me just look at a couple things here.
And then also would the persuasion specialty apply to a discipline roll?
I'm gonna say no on discipline rolls. But you can still make your roll manipulation intimidation. Your difficulty is going to be 7.
Shocking.
So you look to the Chancellor under his hood, making eye contact. His steely eyes meet yours. You speak these words. Even as you speak them, you feel like there's something different about this man, this Chancellor. You try to impose your will upon him with your words, and while you're speaking the words, you can feel age behind his eyes and his face. This isn't an old man. Not apparently old. But you can feel the age when you try fruitlessly to command him. You feel like even on a better night, there might not be even any chance of success of moving him with your words. And he glares at you from under his hood.
She'll arch a brow. Perception alertness. I want to see if I can catch sight of, like, breathing or any outward sign that he might not necessarily be entirely human.
Alright, he is wearing pretty baggy robes and he has his hood up, so it'll be very difficult. Difficulty 8. Is that your roll? 0 successes?
Yep.
Alright, so you're looking him over. His eyes briefly go back to Ocean. My lord, perhaps you should go to sleep. And with that, Ocean slumps in his chair and begins to drift off to sleep. His fork falls, clatters to the floor. And he turns back to you, this Chancellor.
Judith smiles quite earnestly. I didn't dare to hope, but I am pleasantly surprised. Griffith? Or was there another name?
He lowers his hood, showing more the pallor of his skin is quite pale. He looks maybe mid-30s. But he stands more upright now. You can tell that what was something of a hunched position for an old man is really unnecessary for him. He takes on a new posture. I had a feeling I had to worry about you. Quite arrogant of you to assume that you can say such things and act in such a way here.
Which way am I acting? If it offends, I will simply cease it.
There are things in motion which are larger than either of us.
More so than I think perhaps you realize.
Perhaps either of us realize.
You are almost certainly correct in that. I was sincere in my offer. If there are plans in motion on behalf of the Welsh, I would put this petition to my allies as well. Our interests may align, if only in brief.
Let us speak more frankly then.
Please.
What are your interests, Judith Stone?
You are aware of the Covenant.
Of course I am.
Can I throw perception, empathy, and see exactly what he means by that? Because it sounded a certain...
Sure, standard difficulty. One success. You believe he's telling the truth, and that he's bitter about it somehow.
At least I'm in good company. Sounds as though you're no friend of theirs either.
I know more than you might expect, Judith Stone. I know it was your once companion that was responsible for much of the devastation of my land.
I'm aware as well. Though that was before I knew her.
The only reason that you still stand so peacefully in this domain is because I have heard of the events in London, the fallout you have been part of.
And have you heard of the events in Douglas?
He now narrows his eyes. No.
Prince Ambrose set upon it with 500 men-at-arms. As I'm sure you're aware, Douglas can muster maybe a tenth of that. Could muster. Elenid and 500 of Ambrose's men were turned aside by those I speak for.
How is that possible?
By doing what is not expected. You claim I am arrogant to come here speaking and acting as I do. Arrogance is not something I have a monopoly on.
Who is this group you speak for?
The Covenant princes refer to them as anarchs. And if the Welsh and the Irish are making plans to march, I think we would like to march with them.
We seem to have much in common, as the stratagem of doing what is unexpected is also what we have employed.
I have reason to believe that there will be a force marching north from London with the spring thaw to meet the anarch forces near the Scottish border. If you are of a mind to provide aid, their supply trains would be a lovely target, both to aid our efforts and perhaps to put a little weight in your own coffers.
He paces a few steps in thought. There may be opportunity here for all of us if we are truly aligned in this thing.
I had the same thought. It's actually quite fortuitous. I had thought to give a visit to Ireland as well.
Ireland is no friend to our kind once you leave the Pale, and even in the Pale it is dominated by Barbaros now.
Something I am most intimately aware of. But Barbaros is no friend of mine either.
He kind of looks over to Ossian. Descendant was not wrong. We do have some allies in Ireland that have helped and will help, but not in the way perhaps that he imagines. The contact which we have, which I have, is not one who takes kindly to outsiders.
Less so to an Englishwoman.
It was difficult enough for me to get a word in edgewise, but I trust that, as they have in the past, they will do what is best for freeing the tyranny of the English over these lands which belong to the Britons. For they are the true heirs to these lands.
I think now more than ever, I think it prudent to fight for the people of all of England, all of the British Isles, not simply one kingdom or another.
I would not invite you to attempt to parley with the Irish. However, there is another contact which has been helping in this organization, which my grandson spoke of. He is a prior by the name of Damien. Without his help, we would not have ever gotten as far as we have.
Where might I seek him out?
It has been difficult to arrange regular communication with him. The last we spoke, he was in Dorset. He informed me of the news from the mainland. Our Irish allies had been successful.
Oh, I hadn't heard. Successful in what?
He smirks briefly and darkly. Hadn't you? I thought the whole of England had heard that the Lincolnshire prince was destroyed.
Ah, that was you.
No.
Oh, them. Pardon. It was an angle we hadn't considered.
This land is retaking itself. And there are elements who will see it done quietly, but efficiently. I am thankful to have met one such as Damien. Despite your arrogance, I trust your purpose.
Arrogant maybe, but sincere.
He looks in thought briefly. There was a code which Damien provided me, or I was provided to find Damien in Dorset. I will see if I can bring it to you. That is perhaps your best chance of communicating with him and reaching the rest of our network. However, I would strongly advise you to stay out of Ireland, outside the Pale. Our allies in the West, while efficient and certain in their purpose, no more want the English in their lands than the Welsh. I hear even some Irish of the Pale have been destroyed going too far inland.
Perhaps you pass word that you spoke with one of those responsible for relieving Prince Barbaros of one of his carracks.
I have no wish for death. I speak as rarely as possible to my Irish friends. He kind of looks off to the side at that word. They are different. Old, but changed. They would not have a communication, a discussion like you and I have. Should the chance occur, I will tell them. They may not care. In the meantime, he begins pacing off. We'll bring you that code and wish you well in Dorset.
As you say, but remember what I said about the forces marching north. If you choose to act on it, so be it. If not, I for one will bear no ill will.
You hear the open and the close of maybe a small wooden chest around the corner, just out of sight. He turns a corner again, holding a small dusty envelope. We will consider it. However, as things continue, we expect this feud of the Covenant to continue unabated. The longer it goes on, the better for all of us. The better for Britain and the Bretons.
Perhaps. Use caution, though, Griffith. I'm aware of at least one very ancient individual who sought to foment discord between the Covenant before, leading to this very same disunity. Could be that you and your allies are being manipulated to the same ends by the same hand.
Everything we have done has resulted in instability in England and the blood of the English. If this is manipulation, I cannot say it is unwelcome. And you may call me Owen when we are discussing in private, at least.
Well then, Owain. If I were you, I would keep an eye on House Tudor. There is a claim there through the Lancaster line. Might serve you well in the future.
I know the family. I will look into it. And placing the dusty envelope in your hand, he nods to you.
She'll tuck it into the bodice of her dress. I wish you luck and success in your endeavors.
I wish us both luck, victory in the future nights, and freedom from English tyranny.
Quite so. I hope we meet again on the same side of the battlefield.
He smiles and raises his hood again, nodding to you once more. And then he begins to turn to leave.
And she will also rise to depart.
All right. You make your way out. It's still early in the evening, so it's not difficult to find another inn on your way back out. So the scene will fade on you riding away from this countryside manor in Anglesey. And we will take our break and come back in 15. Alright. So get back into it. It catches us up to the current timeline, Judith, as you intended on sending that letter from Anglesey to London. So we'll say that takes place in somewhere in February 1456. And let me remind myself of the content. Okay. This coincides well. Robert and Elenid, you were seeking an audience with at least the Chamberlain Mordecai, if not the Prince.
Mm-hmm.
Elenid had known Tichnovan on attending due to how badly things went last time. Her not being there might help things go over easier.
Okay. So, just Robert, or is Nicholas going to come to this as well?
I don't see a reason for him to go.
Okay. So it will
Okay.
just be Robert. Robert, you get your meeting. It is with the Chamberlain. He would actually request that Elenid be present. And Elenid, you'd be told that this is a meeting not with the Prince, but with Mordecai and Robert.
Well, if she has to go, she has to go.
Yeah, it's a bit odd because Robert's the one who asked to have a meeting, and then when it's brought up, Mordecai makes this request. So you return to St. Mary's Undercroft on one of these nights, let's say end of February, beginning of March. And you find that there are no guards, there's no prince when you enter the dark columns and the pews of the Undercroft. You just see the Chamberlain, Mordecai. He's faced away, kind of looking down at this letter. It takes him a moment before he realizes the two of you have entered. He's waiting up, not on the dais, but just before it, below it. He looks over when the two of you have been standing there for a while. Come. Looks back down at the letter.
Robert gives a nod and steps forward.
Elenid will step forward as well.
There is some news which relates to both of you. I will admit I am not entirely sure what to do with this. And he hands over a letter toward Elenid.
Elenid will read it.
You read this letter, and it seems to be addressed to the Gauntlet and also Mordecai, with it seems like a postscript for Ambrose. The gist of it is that it lists the battle for Douglas, or rather it recounts it, but clearly from a different perspective. You get the impression from reading it that this is someone very close to the goings-on, but I don't know if it's actually signed.
Can either of us check the handwriting?
Did you sign it, Judith?
She didn't, but the contents of the message would have made it relatively obvious. Unless, of course, the handwriting is forged, and then, well, your bet's as good as mine. But I didn't think the one I sent you had any details about the battle at Douglas. That was intended for Bella.
No, it doesn't detail the battle directly, although it does refer that Anaphnamtet was too well defended to be brought down. So I will say, if you can make an perception investigation standard difficulty, since you've seen Judith's writings before, and that combined with your knowledge of, there's not many people who would know all these details.
If he's just sharing the original letter, do you want me to just go ahead and post it?
Yeah, you can do that too. Alright.
Would detail-oriented apply?
Yes, that's 9 successes. This is Judith's handwriting, no doubt. And so, in sum, it discusses kind of a plea to Mordecai, explaining that Anaphnamtet was not able to be destroyed. He's fled for the Levant, but he did name Prince Sebastian of Norwich as a conspirator, acting with this individual, Basileus, as some power behind the Mercers. That Anaphnamtet's purpose, as he described it, was to break allegiances in the Covenant, and that Sebastian helped with this. The author suggests seeking Basileus first and dealing with his influence before going to Sebastian. The letter says he may be found in a tower somewhere in Norwich. There's also concern that the prior Tristan may or may not have known about the involvement of Sebastian. But that it does seem suspicious that he could have at least been throwing the gauntlet off. And the postscript includes detail of a plea to Ambrose to avoid immediate judgment and letting the Gauntlet do their work to undo this corruption, this threat that's been hidden. And perhaps the anarchs are not to blame so much as Basileus is to be blamed. And so after letting you kind of read that for a while, Mordecai kind of folds his arms. There are a few things that I think I could have read besides this that would have, in fact, kept me from showing this to our prince first. If even half of this is true,
That is indeed the question.
Yes.
It could be, but on the other hand, it could be a distraction for them for the anarchs to try to pull something out.
this Prior Tristan, I know the name, is an old member of the Nosferatu, who once served under Adam. Longer than that, perhaps. Have you ever had any contact with this individual?
Did Judith ever mention the name Tristan?
Before this letter, I think no.
Okay.
You've met with Nosferatu in the past, but they rarely identify themselves.
Yeah, that's essentially what I was thinking. I just want to make sure.
I'm currently searching through my notes to find the names of both of the Nosferatu they've met up.
None that have identified themselves by that name.
But you have been meeting with priors throughout your service as Gauntlet members.
Yes,
There are
rare
two that
occasions.
have given us some interesting information, which we have shared previously with, well, the powers that be.
And overall, what is your impression of these priors? Their information, or
Their
agenda?
information so far has been accurate.
I would view this letter with some great skepticism if perhaps Tristan was not listed in it. His child was set for the sun a little over a century ago, and since then, as I understand it from my contacts in the court of London, things changed from the prior's perspective. What they provided the court and the prince. It is possible I'm seeing patterns that do not exist.
It is also possible that the patterns do exist. It is more the question of to trust the letter or not.
On one hand, interaction with Sebastian has been woefully lacking.
He is not one to leave his city for much. But then even if he did, it isn't as though many would know. I've never heard of this Basileus before, but naming Tristan and Sebastian with the history I know, it does at least give me pause.
Let's say it is worth investigating.
Perhaps more alarming is the reference to this company of Mercers, which I am well aware of. They have near limitless financial power, so far as any individual is concerned. The Covenant as a whole would not be able to compare in its wealth.
Well, there is one good side to this letter. If all of the details are in fact true, it can, at least as long as the handwriting wasn't forged, prove that Judith is giving us information.
And in the balance of scales, my dear, I'm sure it will weigh. However, as far as Ambrose is concerned, I am not sure that this will be enough unless it is acted upon.
Of course. And if this letter is in fact false, it is most definitely a trap. Or distraction, one of the two.
More strife within the Covenant would be devastating, I believe.
There are not many who know how to send letters directly to me. I informed Judith of a way for us to maintain communication, so that I would get updates on her progress. That is not a method that I told many. I believe at least the source. As for the content, perhaps these leads can be followed. The company of Mercers is notoriously difficult to turn out.
I've been working this angle. It is my suspicion that they are indeed run by what this letter names as an ancient. And I do know that a group of hunters have been watching them closely. Perhaps more information will bear fruit from my machinations.
He looks back down at the letter. I used to wonder if this feud between Ragnar and Barbaros really was just the blood thickening over the centuries. turning black, or if something else poisoned the well. There are too many coincidences.
If it interests you, that assistant of his that claims to be a Tremere does have a rather prominent position with him. More than one would expect. At least from personal observations.
The Magister, Tredian Swift. Judith spoke of him before. I was less certain now, or rather then than now. There are many things this letter touches upon which perhaps were in the back of my mind. He looks to Robert. You follow up on these Mercers. I can, perhaps, allow for extra resources to be available if needed. I'm not sure how Ambrose will receive this, but I have a dark suspicion if we do not get to the bottom of this, we may all be played by this Basileus.
I'm in agreement there. Whoever's behind the company of Mercers is an imminent threat, at the very least.
And you, we may need a different kind of help, he says, turning to Elenid. There is an attack planned on Carlisle by the anarch forces. Something else that Judith eventually divulged. Unfortunately, Carlisle is north on the western coast of England. It would be very difficult to get any forces up there past Chester, which means we will need some kind of truce or agreement by Barbaros to let our troops pass if we are to support it. Otherwise, they are isolated up there. And Ragnar is the only one who could possibly bring enough forces to make a difference.
I can talk to Ragnar, but Barbaros... My attempts at talking to Barbaros in the past have not been the greatest.
And perhaps pull this Tredian Swift out for what he is, if he is this charlatan. Perhaps that will get his attention. We'll have to do something or Carlisle may burn. I will leave it up to you to decide how best to handle that.
Though, we found something that could potentially put us in good favor with Barbara.
Kinda waits expectantly.
We looked into that trading vessel, the one that you said was normal. Well, Robert, do you want to talk about the parts that you personally investigated so I don't miss anything?
Yes. The vessel we suspect has been carrying shipments to the former island that is now a thing of the past. The timeline matches up with the start of the Anarch Rebellion being known. And the ledgers do not match up. Clear obfuscation is our work here.
Furthermore, when the official that Robert talked to tried to remember the conversation that he had with the captain, that memory is hazy. It seems suspiciously like the work of Dominic.
And quite so.
Said captain goes by the name of Saraceno.
The name means nothing to me. There was another that you brought in, a strange man. Seemed a barber, physician of some kind, perhaps.
Yes?
What make you of him? He served you before.
That he has, and he has been most useful.
What we are dealing with here is very delicate matters. Could use precision and a keen eye. Either looking into this Magister Tredian Swift or this possible support vessel for the Anarchs. See that he helps you.
He is already helping us with the ship they were using to get supplies, and on that note,
Yes.
the ship in question, around the time the gossip began in Elysium about Barbaros getting a ship, it vanished, and a month later, this trade group ended up coming around. I am uncertain if it's the same vessel or not, but...
What ship did Barbaros acquire?
I know there's an exact name for it. I'm trying to remember the name.
Carrick?
Yeah. A Carrick.
That would stand
Said
out.
Said ship vanished.
In the southern ports of Portugal and Mediterranean, that might be easier to conceal. Those ships are not very common in these waters. If it made port, you would notice. Perhaps there's more to this than I thought. But a ship like that, docking in London, would be remembered. Suggest perhaps there's more than one ship involved.
Quite possible.
As I said, I will trust that you use your resources and manpower as you see fit. But be cautious with who you involve. If you trust this individual, and he does seem useful, and you have the authority to involve him. I need to determine how to break this to Ambrose. He looks back down at the letter again and starts pacing off a little bit.
Oh, one more thing.
He looks up kind of slowly.
Said ship is due to make dock. You said a month passed, right?
Somewhere in March, yeah.
Said ship is due to make dock in March. This March. That is when it's expected.
If it keeps in line with its schedule.
Indeed.
But it is known to run.
Well, I'd be very curious where it's going, given that Douglas is gone.
Precisely. If we can find out where it's going, we could find out where the anarchs are holding themselves up again.
Most useful information to have.
I will leave you to it then. If you'll excuse me.
I shall take my leave.
He's already
And
started to
shall
walk away.
I? And she's gonna get out of there, hopefully before Ambrose shows up.
And Robert's leaving as well.
Alright. Two of you disappear, presumably into the streets of London. Now, in broad strokes, we will return. Is this shared with Nicholas, your discussion and findings?
Well, he is to be included, is he not?
Mm-hmm.
So, Nicholas, you are brought up to speed on all of this and invited to assist.
Nicholas will indeed assist. It behooves him to be so close to the cogs of power, so to speak.
So, for sake of convenience, we'll say that perhaps a couple nights later, Robert and Elenid are in Elenid's new manor, and Nicholas, you return from a night of perhaps getting some supplies to fit out your new basement. And as you step down, or go to step down the stairs into the basement, you see that Robert and Elenid are actually in the hallway, speaking quietly, and you happen upon them.
Ah, good evening.
Good evening to you as well.
What news?
Very interesting developments.
I am anxious to hear what you've discovered.
And I'll montage us through your recap of everything you heard.
Ah, well. It seems there are many pawns on this chessboard we did not account for.
Quite so. Now, how would you like to proceed?
I don't think that's up to me, is it?
Two possibilities were given. Which do we prioritize?
The ship is due to show up this month, however, we need to be able to get matters solved with Barbaros so we can easily march forces through there.
I suspect
That is probably going to take more time since it's Ragnar's forces that would be going through there.
I have no sway with Ragnar anymore.
I have sway with Ragnar, however I have none with Barbaros. In fact, I think I might have less sway with him than I had in the past if he discovers that I have been working with her on certain things.
The ship of his that went missing. Perhaps we can get him to look past this petty feud if the true fate of it was discovered.
Perhaps. Though, if the anarchs do in fact have it, the seas around the isle are no longer safe.
True enough.
We must then...
Unless some of the... That is, unless some of, how the ports were fortified with some, more difficult to get weapons, but I highly doubt that would be possible.
You are the Gauntlet Lords. Direct me. What would you rather have seen done?
Since the ship's timeline is coming up, if we can set some way of observing, or perhaps even taking in the captain for questioning himself.
Precisely, we should deal with that before we head north, provided it's on schedule.
And you think Carlisle has enough time?
We should move quickly. If it is just capturing a captain, perhaps we could have others do this work for us.
Yes, but we need to assure that they, would be good at the job they're tasked with. That they would not be so easily swayed by this captain or his gift.
A tall order indeed. For we don't know what gifts he possesses.
Outside of dominate, yes. And even that is just a suspicion.
Yes. I am of a mind to search for talent here, and then to quickly see what news out of Canterbury there is. If anything is pertinent, that could be of use in further negotiations. With more concrete evidence of a hand behind the worshipful Mercers, all inner conflict should diminish. And then it is a quick trip up north for me, perhaps to the court of Barbaros.
Just don't get yourself killed looking into that company. After all, that's what the previous Gauntlet was researching before their untimely demise.
Quite so. I will be cautious, to the best that I'm able. And I suppose after we found our talents, do you intend to go to York, or shall you be traveling with me, Nicholas?
I shall travel wherever I'm required.
Right now, our priority is not York. Our priority is with Barbaros.
Very well. After we seek out the resources that have been offered to us to detain the captain of this ship, we shall leave towards Canterbury together, Nicholas.
He bows slightly, holding out his arms. Did you all make him aware of the contents of the letter?
I thought we did.
I just wasn't
Yes.
sure if you told him everything.
If everything was, then yeah.
I'm quite curious how it makes both of you feel. To know that one of the princes of the Covenant has betrayed his own.
With all that has been happening, I wish I could say I was surprised, but I just see it as an obstacle that needs to be conquered.
A prince is meant to be a pillar of our society, and you say you're not surprised that he was duplicitous.
I never did like this one.
Though, interestingly, when everything was going on elsewhere, when there were so many leads pulling us in different directions, the one place that never had anything pulling us towards it was his domain.
Perhaps if you knew what to look for, you would have seen the signs already. Or indeed it seems that you did and chose to ignore them.
At the time, it seemed like there were more pressing matters.
And pressing indeed have the issues we've come to deal with.
If I may, just one more question. You said you've never liked this prince. Do you harbor some innate prejudice toward the Nosferatu? Mind you, this is only for posterity's sake.
Nothing superficial. I can just say he rubbed me the wrong way when I met him.
Nicholas nods, satisfied. Or at least it seems that way. He's hard to read.
And we are set on our purpose. Any questions?
I do not believe so. Though I do have a mild concern how Barbaros will react to me after assisting with Ragnar's troops not too long ago.
Are these princes at war?
Just barely not. If anything sways in a certain direction, it's likely to topple over and chaos will ensue.
How positively droll. I'm almost ashamed I don't keep up on the local political climate.
That is why there is some importance with Barbaros. His Magister is helping to fan the flames. Yet he is rather protective of said Magister, and likely if it is brought up, he will not hear reason.
And would you take it upon yourself to make him see it?
If he doesn't see it, or if otherwise he refuses to let troops go through for other reasons, then there would be no choice but to force him to see it in order to be able to march through.
How I would love to be a fly on that wall.
Indeed.
Well then, time is wasting. How are we to detain this captain?
Perhaps the first stop would be Elysium. Someone we could trust to lead a small contingency.
Someone you can trust. Is there any such thing?
In Elysium? Likely not.
Did you have any other places in mind?
As we have no concrete evidence of this K-Knight's potency or age, I suppose it is only logical to seek out the aid of other K-Knights.
Precisely.
And Elysium, unfortunately, is the place to find them.
Very good.
While you're doing this, I will keep watch over the docks.
Perhaps our ship will come early, after all. We shall meet again shortly, then. And with that, Robert has nothing much more to say.
All right. A group of you depart. So it sounds like Elenid will be mostly watching the docks, and Robert and Nicholas going to Elysium. Did I get that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you depart, leaving for Elysium to recruit some support to get at this Captain Saraceno of the Hemlock. You, I assume, are trying to recruit like you did before, Robert?
He's had success with that, but the bunch he picked may be a rare breed. He'll go to Bella and ask, or maybe even the other harpy. What's her name?
Helen?
Yes, Helen.
All right. When the two of you enter Elysium, it doesn't take long. When you are kind of moving through the crowds, you get the impression that there's kind of and not an uproar, but certainly a buzz of news. And you pass enough conversation and hear enough familiar words that you get the impression that news has spread of Douglas in a way it otherwise hasn't spread to the mortal world. There seems to be ongoing discussions in small groups here and there, some hushed tones, some less than hushed tones, of the battle, but not as either of you recall specifically. There seems to be a lot of aggrandizing of the anarch side of things. There's virtually no mention, if any mention at all, of the mass embracing of townsfolk or the bloodshed that caused, mostly focusing on the just and righteous anarchs winning this great outnumbered battle against Covenant forces, sending them sprawling and fleeing. It's on the tip of every tongue in Elysium, this defeat of the Covenant by the anarchs, spreading like a virus.
Robert's demeanor does grow more serious at this, as he seeks out Helen. Or Bella, whoever is there at the moment.
They're both present. They're actually split off for once in their little pods of popularity. Bella's closer and seems to catch your attention with the flash of her eyes and a smile. The other, you presume, neonates that she's speaking to seem to recognize you and your status and give you some space.
And Bella it is tonight, as Robert will meet her gaze and begin to approach.
Well, good evening to me. Once again. My Lord DeVere.
Once again, Bella, it is a pleasure.
And
The
remind me
things-
your name. She looks to Nicholas.
Nicholas is a bit put off by her pretending not to know him since they only recently spoke. Nicholas Ridley.
Oh, yes. She smiles playfully at you.
His lip doesn't even twitch.
Come join me. As a Gauntlet Lord, you must be very touched by this news.
Well, certainly.
Now, there are some rumors that Elened herself was there. Oh, how embarrassing that must be.
Oh, I am curious to know just what you know.
Well, it's the talk of Elysium, my dear. Just open your ears. Kind of looks about her. Everyone's heard.
The fragments and rumors grow. What exactly have you heard?
Well, that this great and powerful Covenant force came to try and stamp out this revolution. Anarch group, I hear it's called. Well, it sounds as though they were beat one and all by a very small force of anarchs. Doesn't give much confidence to our esteemed leaders or their forces, does it?
No, if that is all that you were told, no.
I'm sure the princes are even in more an uproar, trying to silence voices of oppression. Well, difficult to silence all of this.
I don't suppose you'd be willing to divulge how you came about this.
She kind of giggles a little bit and raises up her hand briefly, a kind of faux gesture. Where does any rumor begin, my dear? I simply heard it just as anyone else here.
As expected. I'm sure your mind is burning with curiosity at how things went.
Well, I've heard enough pieces to put it all together myself. I think I have a good idea of how it went. I don't suppose your dear little Elenid has said anything. Of course, if she was there, I don't know if she would want to.
She's not a social sort. Otherwise, you would be able to ask her yourself.
Well, that would be a bit awkward, wouldn't it? If she was there, and I'm the one that asks, well then I just look like a bitch.
Oh, then. As this is how this story is being told. And it is much more exciting than how things actually happened. I don't think there's much to say about it.
Her head kind of tilts in mild curiosity. And you're the authority on how it actually went.
Well, I do have knowledge of the inner workings. And a town did just disappear.
Almost as though it was eaten from within, Nicholas says cryptically.
Her eyes turn to you, Nicholas. She studies you.
He blinks at her, tilting his head slightly, looking at her like a butterfly speared with needles for dissection.
Have you spoken to Helena then?
Not recently, he says.
Well, if there's another version of the story to be heard, I haven't heard it yet.
I rather like the story as it's being told now. Perhaps it gets the princes off their asses to do something.
So you do care about what the princes accomplish. I took you as a distant, detached kind of scholar of sorts.
If the princes fall, so do we all.
Her eyes kind of drift off to the side, as though uncertain of that statement.
Unless you know something I don't.
I think the fall of the princes would be very tragic for the princes. Some of us thrive in chaos.
Yes. Everything is all well and good until an invasion happens.
It sounds as though one day it just didn't go quite the way the princes hoped. She kind of bats her eyelashes and recrosses her legs. I'm sorry, my dear. Was there something else that you needed?
Perhaps. Yes. Do you know of any neonates that are dependable?
A wry smile forms on her face. I know of a few who can perform. What kind of dependability are you looking for, my dear?
Just to take You take a suspect into custody. Suspected K-Knight, that is.
You mean like Amelia? And her head tilts again, studying you.
Much older. Well, much more well-versed in the ways of the world, less innocent, certainly.
Oh, so you do remember her. I had begun to wonder. Your face was showing some changes, dear.
Ah, that obvious.
Quite. She nods.
I had hoped it was my imagination.
It isn't. As far as, local neonates you might recruit for your bully boy task force, I'm sure I could point you in the direction of one or two. I'd heard you'd already made something of a task force of your own. A few upstarts hoping to rise in the ranks. What happened to this group, Robert?
And thankfully, they completed their task without any loss of life.
And discarded just the same. Unfortunate.
Not so. But to depend too much on the same group.
Then they become dependable. She smiles coyly at you. Wouldn't want any group of neonates becoming too influential, would we, Robert?
They've completed their task. I wouldn't want them to face undue destructive focus.
You might have more luck speaking with Cash. He has a few hounds hanging around here somewhere, I'm sure. He'd be willing to loan them out.
Very fine suggestion.
Do let me know if you need any other services performed, Robert, my dear. That goes double for you. And she winks at Nicholas. You could use something. She looks you up and down.
A great many things, I should think. None of which you can provide.
I do like a challenge. Perhaps another night.
Very well. We shall have to speak again another time.
Her rose lips part for just a moment, showing some fang as she smiles again at you. And then she turns back to the conversation she was having.
Robert will seek out Cash.
As though on cue, you look around and see that at some time during your conversation, it looks as though Cash did enter Elysium. He seems to be speaking with Alexander Hitchcock. But he's not very far away now.
Very good. Robert may step up and speak with them.
Alexander sees that you're approaching, looks like Cash more than him. Kind of bows his head to Cash briefly, looks to you and nods and moves on. Cash turns to you. What can I do for you?
Good evening. Require hounds to capture a suspect.
You done say. Which little shite is it? He kind of looks around Elysium, expecting to point someone out.
None in here. Within this month, there will be... Shall we go somewhere more quiet?
If you insist. You start stepping over towards one of the alcoves where the pitter-patter and splash of water from the nearby decorative fountains creates some white noise. I assume Nicholas is following along for this?
He's actually not. He'll touch Robert on the shoulder and whisper in his ear, I'm going to go listen around.
Robert will nod at this and lead Cash to it, or go with Cash to an alcove.
Mm-hmm. So he stops by where one of these little water pools is collecting and then draining, collecting. What's this about?
I have information on a possible anarch supplier that has been doing port runs. They are scheduled to come within this month. We need eyes and a force that are able to apprehend the Canite suspected, and a crew aboard a trading vessel.
He nods knowingly. I've got a few lads. Be up for the task. They're a little green, but they'll do.
I trust they know their way around the blade.
I wouldn't worry about that.
How about support? Mind tricks will come into play.
What kind of support you're looking for?
Good question indeed. Perhaps one more silent that could approach unnoticed and strike a devastating blow.
Aye, one of my lads is discreet, we'll say.
Very good. I think this will be promising.
When do you need him? And where?
Robert will inform Cash of the location, and only he'll give him the date that they are expected, but to be prepared on multiple nights, as this may not be exact math.
Yeah, it's a couple more times. And I'm assuming that Chamberlain and Prince are well aware of this all going on.
Yes. If not the Prince, certainly the Chamberlain has informed him by now.
Right. Well, they'll be ready when you need them. As long as it's coming from high up, won't require much more.
Very good. Well, thank you for the assistance, and I will look forward to hearing about what happened. And I'm sure Ambrose will be quite pleased to have this man under control.
So you won't be there tonight.
How have things fared in the city as of late?
Oh. I suppose you heard the news. Covenant took a setback. Douglas. Sounds.
Yes, all too loud. The anarchs have certainly painted a beautiful picture of their victory. Or at least continued existence.
He shrugs. Bit concerning if true. If they could beat that many. What kind of weapons they have.
Ah, are you not privy to the battle?
No more or less than anyone else. What do you know?
I can see why this would want to be kept secret, I suppose.
If anyone knows, Eleanor will. Suppose if I hear it, I'll hear it from her. Otherwise, keep my business out of it. If you'll excuse me.
Good evening, Cash.
He doesn't really give you an acknowledgement, he just kind of briskly walks by you. Meanwhile, what is Nicholas getting up to?
Nicholas is wandering the periphery, listening in on the conversations. He knows mostly what they're about, but he's savoring the misinformation. And he will, of course, make himself available to any who might want to engage with him. But he still stays well away from Simone. She infuriates him.
As if to infuriate you more, every time you happen to glance that way, you know she's staring at you.
He will endeavor not to look.
Alright, let me check my notes. For the most part, you hear most of what you've already heard. Some of the Canaanites are speaking of the kind politics, commenting on the timing of things. It sounds as though the King Henry VI, has regained control of the throne, coming out of his feeble state. The Duke of York has been sent west to Ireland again. That seems to have given some concern about this feud between Barbaros and Ragna. If it means anything, it signals anything. There's a lot of uncertainty and tension.
He soaks it up like a butter soaks up, or bread soaks up butter, I should say. He likes tension. Keeps things interesting.
Make a perception awareness roll again. Difficulty 6. I feel like you have an applicable specialty here.
In perception intuitive.
No, not for this. But still 3 successes is enough. You've gotten this feeling before. You've been in London. Feeling you felt on the docks, perhaps other places. There is a presence in Elysium, not far from you. And at first you chalked it up to Simone's gawking at you. For some reason staring. But you notice even when you look that way, she doesn't always stare at you, and yet this presence, this eerie air seems to follow you. Perhaps it's this change has come on to you since the embrace, what others call madness, but it's more discreet. You do think someone is here which is not seen, but is focusing on you, perhaps has been for a while. Even here where disciplines are forbidden.
He's going to try to surreptitiously suss out this person, using his prodigious aspects.
Alright. Any power in particular you want to look at? Or generally just heightening your senses to try and determine where this is from?
Exactly, yes.
Right. You want to do this without being obvious about looking around. And let's see what is most applicable. I will take a perception investigation. Difficulty is going to be 7, only because you're trying to do this without being obvious about it.
Once again, intuitive if it applies.
It might. Let me make a roll here. Try to look at something. You get close. You get very close in trying to pick this out. You find a couple spaces where you're certain maybe something just was there. Spaces in Elysium where you just realize no one was really standing. And you kind of focus on it, no one's there now. You find other places where the crowd's parting as though something's moving through it, but and you lose it again. You do know someone's here. You're barely unable to track it. And you think it's maybe only because you're being very discreet about it. But someone is here who does not want to be seen. And they are very good at this.
And they seem very focused on me, I can imagine.
It does seem that way. That's how you first picked it out. This presence very close to you.
And if they want to talk, they'll make their presence known. He will make his excuses to whatever group he is hovering around at the time, and make his way outside. Robert can find him there. But he's going to do it in a very meandering way, so it doesn't look like he's running.
Alright. So you make your way out into the streets of London, leaving Robert behind as he's talking to Cash still at this time. And we see a scene of Nicholas walking down the streets of Savile Row. Many tailors that are now closed. There are still many crowds about here and there. And from near the stone of the road, you can see him walking off in the distance, and someone steps forward in ragged roads tearing at the end. You just see the boots visible as many people walk around this person. They begin walking after Nicholas, and the scene fades on their dark boots heading in his direction, the crowds disappearing around them. And at that, we will end the scene and the session and pick it up again next session. Fine.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Good game.
Mm-hmm.
Many thanks to Robert for dropping in on Elysium.
Oh, you're welcome. I wanted to see that mayhem.
Yeah, a lot of stuff getting dropped on you guys. And also that you are dropping yourself. I had fun.
Definitely.
And if it's spread that far in London, you know it's gotten out of London.
Getting some bigger pieces of the puzzle. Some stuff that's been in waiting for over a year in real life. Which is always satisfying for me. So we will do one experience all around. We'll do some entertaining role players. Start with Robert.
Oh, I'm going to have to give it to Judith for just putting that information out there, painting the anarchs as being having a heroic victory.
Words have power, man.
And I really enjoyed that.
I really enjoyed the fact that you didn't do anything to refute it.
Yeah, nobody did, apparently. I was waiting for somebody to say what different. Nobody did. Judith.
Yeah, I'm gonna stick to my previous statement. I'm gonna give it to Robert for knowing the truth about that rumor and then saying nothing to contradict.
To what end, we can only guess. How about Elenid?
I will likewise give it to Robert.
Cool. And Nicholas.
Yeah, no doubt, Robert.
Oh, thank you.
Cool. Alright, guys. Good game. Very much looking forward to seeing how this plays out and concluding our scene with Nicholas. I'm gonna have fun with that. So,
Oh boy.
Yeah. I don't think I know of any reason why we can't play next Sunday, so hopefully it'll just be next Sunday.